Good evening, and welcome back to the Placid Plastic Podcast. You might realize that we've got a brand new pool here. We've got all the packs that's I think been released so far, and we're gonna get every single duck over the course of the next run of the podcast. Unfortunately, they don't let us do different levels yet with the multiplayer thing, but maybe someday.
Yes,
But
there is a couple other maps we haven't been able to show you guys. Only this one's available on multiplayer, but they have a snow one, an alien one, and then there's another one, right? Or
I
is it
think there's
just
only
three?
the three.
Okay. Well, to kick off this brand new pool, we've talked about good games, we've talked about bad games. Today, I want to start off by talking about games that just missed the mark for you. And that can be you started off having a great time with the game, and then something happened near the end that really kind of like soured the experience for you, or maybe you were just playing the game and it never really quite hit that moment where you're like, yeah, this is a great game. And I'm not really talking like average games. I'm talking about games that maybe fall into the category of being disappointing. Like something about the game, whether it was story, gameplay, whatnot, never really quite clicked with you, and it just kind of ended on like that's kind of disappointing. And I'll start off just to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So, as you know, I'm a big Resident Evil fan. Um, Although these days, lately, it seems like I kind of dislike the newer releases more than I like them. But I remember, so kind of the start of the decade of the 2010s, Capcom was kind of in a bad spot when it came to its games. You could argue from like 2008, like a solid 10-year period from like '08 to 18, where they were really just kind of like not really doing good by their franchises. Resident Evil in particular, they just released 5 and 6 and a couple other really bad spin-offs like Operation Raccoon City and Umbrella Corps, and they were really just kind of, not really sure what to do with the franchise. And of course, things changed for them when PT was released back in 2014, which is crazy, Lucas, by the way, that PT is 10 years old now, because I specifically remember playing that with you and a mutual friend of ours way back when it came out.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's a it's looks so good for if you look at it and think 10 years ago. It's crazy.
yeah. So, but PT came out, and it kind of revitalized the horror genre, for better or for worse, because there were a lot of copycats that were like, oh, I could do a first person horror game too. And Capcom, even though they deny it, there's no doubt that they took a lot of inspiration from PT when they released Resident Evil 7, which was their first attempt at a first-person horror game, and it did really well sales-wise, and it kind of revitalized Resident Evil. And ever since 2017, the franchise has been going strong sales-wise, popularity-wise, and it's all thanks to 7 kicking things off. Now, I like 7. However, unfortunately, right near the latter half of the game, I want to say the last third of the game, the quality takes a massive nosedive. See, the first part of Resident Evil 7 starts out really strong. You're in like a Louisiana swamp mansion with the crazy family that it's obviously, taken over by the main bad guy, and they all trying to kill you, and it's all very freaky House of Horrors, Texas Chainsaw Massacre type vibes. Very entertaining first half of the game. And then the last third of the game sees you on a downed cruise ship, and it just takes a huge nosedive. Like the way the game is structured in the latter half is just really boring, and it's you spend like several hours in this like dark, dingy, derelict cruise ship, and it's just such a boring slog. And then
Well,
the last couple,
I don't remember that at all. I thought it ended after you did like a fight in the woods and then
no,
Redfield shows up.
no, that's the very, very end. That's the last boss.
I completely like the whole cruise
See,
ship thing is out of my head.
because it sucks so much, you forgot about it. I mean, you remember the early parts of the game, right?
Yeah, yeah,
With the
I
dad and
recall it
whatnot.
all.
But and it's pretty common, at least nowadays it is, that the last part of 7 really takes a huge nosedive, because not only is the cruise ship boring, but if you really think about it, Resident Evil 7 has like the most generic lame looking bad guys outside of like the Baker family. Like Resident Evil is usually known for its zombies or its parasite infected bad guys, and they're very memorable. Like, oh, Zombies are very memorable. Zombie dogs, the Nemesis from 3, or Mr. X from 2, or the Las Plagas from 4 and 5. You can remember this stuff. The crazy guy with the chainsaw in the latter games. Whereas at 7, besides the main family, all you fight are these black goo monsters, and that's all you fight. It's just goo monsters, and they're just like so forgettable and boring. And of course,
They're
the
the
cruise ship
only game with
is
goo monsters. What do you mean?
the cruise ship is full of goo monsters, and it's just that latter half of the game is such a huge disappointment that anytime that I've attempted to go back and play 7, I stop myself because I'm like, I don't want to go through the cruise ship section. It's just so terrible. And so I guess my question to you is, have you ever had a game like that where like you were having a good time or you thought it was going to be good and then something happened, you're like, ugh, it suddenly isn't fun anymore, or this is a disappointment?
It's hard for me to think and separate them like that. Generally speaking, I would excuse me. I would think that, like, in my mind, I just think of them as, God damn, I'm fucking a mess right now. I'm spitting while I talk. Jesus. Yeah, I'm sorry if it's not obvious. I'm not feeling well. They just kind of sit in my mind as games I didn't like or games that I thought were bad, right? So I would say Mirror's Edge Catalyst maybe would be my choice as something I can think of right now. It was a game that I just picked up and I was like, hell yeah. I thought the first Mirror's Edge game was really fun. I want to play this one, which I think was supposed to be a prequel. And it just never got to a point where I was like, this is fun. I'm having a good time. It was like, this is just mediocre parkour game with bad combat. Like, it wasn't fun to play. I don't think it ever got to the point where I was like, yes, let's kick some ass or let's do the cool stuff. Especially when you compare it to something like Dying Light, like, was an absolute blast. The first game was just, oh hell yeah, I'm fucking running through all these zombies, jumping off their heads, drop kicking them, slicing them up. That's how you make a parkour game. Absolutely. Even the second game, I know a lot of people they weren't super fans of how the changes of certain things worked, how the world was further into the apocalypse, so things like guns or didn't exist or they weren't in the same capacity, and the grappling hook wasn't a whipped one. But that game I didn't have any issues with. It all made sense to me, and I understood and appreciated all of it. It was a fun game. But yeah, Mirror's Edge didn't take off at any point. I'd rather play Watch Dogs.
Wow. I think we talked about this many episodes ago, but like Telltale Games, you come to realization that like the illusion of choice that they gave you was one big lie. But like,
Yeah.
the first Walking Dead that they made was really, really good. And like, I don't know, did you ever play the original first Walking Dead game they made back in like
I haven't
2012?
played a single Telltale game.
Okay, so they started off making, I think their first big game they made was that Jurassic Park game in 2011. But then in 2013, from 2012 and 2013, because this will take you back, they used to release episodes every couple of months back when that was a thing, back when like episodic content was a thing. And the first season was really, really good, and really well done. And the second season was such like a massive like letdown because they did this really annoying thing. And I brought this up in the previous podcast episode, but they did this really annoying thing where, so let's say there's a scene where this character's about to die, and you either have a choice of leaving them or saving them. But the problem is, if you save them, because there's a certain aspect of the game where they could die, they didn't bother like fleshing out the character, and then the character would just end up dying regardless of if you saved them a little bit later. So like an example was like there's a moment in the second season where like one of your companions is pinned under some wood, and you can either bail on them and run away, or you can pull them out from the wood. And if you pull them out, they don't say anything. Like, they have no lines up until they automatically die anyway later. They get shot in the head. And it's like, well, why did I bother saving them if they're not going to say anything? They don't have any lines of dialogue, because the creators are like, well, we have to account for the fact that they could be dead in the scene because you potentially didn't rescue them earlier. You know what I mean?
Instead of just making a different scene where it all fucking makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
I understand they budget. They fell under for a reason, and it was because they couldn't manage what they were doing, so they had
yeah,
to take these
exactly.
shortcuts. But that's not an excuse. That's just bad management.
So that was an example of a game that was just such a huge disappointment because the first season was so well done, and the second season just takes a huge nosedive of quality. Another example of a game for me that like missed the mark would probably be so
I'm gonna have to pull up
it's
my
kind of interesting
library for
because
this.
what
I'm gonna have to pull up my game library for this so I can.
it's kind of interesting because like I'm a huge like when it comes to the God of War games, I'm not talking about the reboots. I'm talking about the old ones back when it was a hack and slash set in
Okay.
the Greek era. And like I love the third game that came out in 2010. It still is like one of my favorite hack and slashes ever. It's like honestly like probably the second best hack and slash behind Metal Gear Rising in terms of just like because for me like a good hack and slash is like how awesome do I feel when I'm playing this game?
Yeah,
Because that
absolutely.
in my opinion is like what makes a good hack and slash is I just feel like an absolute badass. That's why I like the Force Unleashed games because the Force Unleashed games are just like what if we made somebody that was just absolutely broken power wise, and you just feel like an absolute badass when you play Force Unleashed. When you play Metal Gear Rising, you're fucking cutting massive machines in half with your sword with badass music playing in the background. When you're playing the newest Devil May Cry, you feel like an absolute badass with awesome music. And so God of War 3 is like one of my favorite games because you're killing like the most powerful Greek pantheon gods like Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, Hercules, Hermes, um, Kronos. You know, you're killing all these massive gods and titans with. You feel like an ultimate badass. So before they made the reboot series, they made one more game between that called God of War Ascension. The God of War Ascension is a prequel to all the previous God of War games when you were still serving Ares, the God of War. And because it was their last game before they went on a hiatus and they rebooted the series, I was really excited to play it because I was like, I wonder how they're going to top how awesome 3 was. It's like the most boring, forgettable, whatever game. It's just kind of there. And like there are cool moments, but compared to the previous God of Wars where you're going, you're hunting and killing Greek gods and doing all these badass set piece moments and you play Ascension and it's like it's kind of boring.
That's
It's just
yeah.
kind of
It's
it's
very
just kind of a
disappointing.
letdown. So that's how I would categorize that.
I think I've got one.
Good.
It's gonna be Starfield.
Ooh. Now you've
Yeah.
gone on Starfield rants. Now, last time we talked about Starfield, you were waiting for a certain DLC pack, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm waiting for the fucking creation kit to come out. The thing that makes their games playable is the fact that the modding community will fix everything that's wrong with them. It's been 6 months and we've got no word. And like we've heard they're like it's coming first quarter. First quarter's here, passed. It's second quarter now. We got nothing, no word. I assumed they were going to, I don't know, say something if they were going to push it back further and be like, all right, we got a better idea of what we're doing here. This is going to take a lot longer than we anticipated or something, but no. Instead, we got radio silence, no word. On one hand, I understand. On the second hand, it's still frustrating, right? Anyway, outside of that, Starfield, it had I don't want to say a rough start as far as like when you get into the game. You start the game off. It's classic Bethesda's main title startup. You get your some nameless chump. Things happen, and now you're not. And it's always the same kind of thing. They want to push you into looking at this. Like here's the slow grind, and then here's the action. That's how they like to do it. Um, and it works a little bit. It's a little weird because their UI was a little strange to see, and then you go from being able to equip shoes, pants, shirt, gloves, helmet to spacesuit, helmet, and underclothes, like one whole outfit. That's all you get. And so you're like, okay, so there's only so much I can do here. Your weapons, forget about modding them. They made modding just a slog. They made so many aspects of it an absolutely irritating slog. But once you finally get the game started, you get the ship, you go out, you start exploring, you go to the cities, you do the quests. Some of the quests, like the the faction quests and the corporate quest, they're actually fun. They've got a lot of great aspects about them, and they have so much. Uh, I don't want to say so much to do, but they've got so much like character and personality within them. A lot of the characters, uh, they uh, they tell a story, right? And that's the whole point. And then you actually play the fucking story, and you're like, what happened to the writers? Did they get taken out back and shot? Like, what happened? Why did they stop doing the good stuff and started making this garbage? Like, the ending. My biggest problem, and I guess spoiler alert, is the fact that the game's ending is the game never ends, and I think that's just stupid. I don't like that. If a game is gonna have a reliance on some kind of after story thing, then it needs to be able to tie up at the end, and then you'll be able to like, oh, here, I've done everything. Let me just sit here, relax, and just kind of do what I want to do now. Because they make it new game plus, new game plus, new game plus, get stronger, 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 stronger. And that's cool in one capacity. But for a game that you want to put a lot of time into, like I put 116 hours into it. It's a long time for regular adults. We don't have a lot of time to spend playing video games, and like Risk of Rain 2, I've played over a significantly longer period of time, but I have the exact same amount of hours in there. So it's like you play what you can, right? And for a game to have so many strong moments and then have so many weak aspects is just so sad. And the fact that their DLC, I mean, I don't expect DLC to come out within 6 months. If you're planning on DLC and you have it ready in the game day one, that's a bigger problem. We talked about that. But it's just a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of things that just don't resolve. And for them to have to make DLC to do it, it's kind of unfortunate, as opposed to making the DLC and then retconning those things. I'd rather they did. Like, here's some thing about this faction, right? This faction, they're spooky, they're secret, you don't know anything about him. Kill that guy. Okay, cool. Now what? That's it? Alright. And now it just feels unfinished. And that's kind of the problem I have with it, is the story just stopped at some point. It went from, this is cool and interesting, and then it went to, well, now I know what to expect. I know what this is going. There's still some cool things about this, but I don't like what you're doing. Like, this just isn't fun anymore. I just feel like I have to do this. It feels like an obligation and not like an enjoyment. The world is, or the galaxy is so big and so fucking empty, and I hate that. It's just having an empty area is cool, especially if you're fans of Fallout New Vegas. But you got to be able to do something with that, right? And the outpost building is so weak, it's absolutely not worth investing time into. It's the worst part about the game. And it's my favorite part about Fallout 4 and 76, is being able to do this building. And they made it in Starfield the worst possible iteration it could be, by making
Are they still using the same engine from Skyrim?
So it's weird to say the same engine, because they'll tell you no, because they've named it different things. Like Morrowind, I think Fallout 3 was the Gamebryo engine, and then they made the Creation engine, and now they're on Creation engine 2. But it's all built on the same foundation of their original engine. So, yes and no. But mostly yes. It's the same thing, which the way it runs from Fallout 4 forward, it's fine. Like, it's got some bugs, it's got some regular things that I don't have issues with these. It's a very user-friendly engine. Being able to click elements while you have the console open is very useful stuff for when you're doing commands and experimenting with things, which is cool. The fact that they made such a user-friendly engine is why people like modding in it so much. Is I play some other games and their modding things are so basic. It's mostly asset flips or it's value changes. Like, oh, your jump like velocity is slightly higher, so now you jump higher. Oh, okay, that's not much of a mod, but okay, I can accept it. But Starfield's like, oh no, yeah, we scripted entire storylines and well, not Starfield, sorry, the ones that work. They you can script entire characters and voice lines and all these other things to make content, real content, as opposed to just look, you can play as the Mandalorian by making it so that this armor that you get later on just looks like that, and now you can't actually use that armor if you decide because it's gone. Which is what modding is right now in Starfield. There's some things people have been able to get away with, but it's so buggy, it's not worth experimenting with until Creation Kit comes out and people can properly make well-suited mods that are compatible with each other and not overwriting the same files and things like that. But Starfield, long story short, is one of those games that I was having a lot of fun in, and then I just got tired, and it's a bit disappointing, and I'm scared for the future of the Elder Scrolls because Fallout 76 was an absolute shit start, and even now, like, it's a better game and it's got more to it, but it's still it's not what it should be. It's not a Fallout game. It's a multiplayer game with a Fallout skin, and it plays decently if it didn't freeze frame every 15 fucking seconds for 3 seconds at a time. But that's something that they've had this whole damn time, and the reason why I stopped playing it is because of that.
Did you ever beat the story?
Yeah, I've beat just about everything in Fallout 76 except for the
No, sorry, I meant for Starfield the story.
Oh, yeah, I beat that too. I did have, there was a bug that was pretty game breaking early on release. That was, when you did your New Game Plus, you wouldn't be able to save, which is pretty bad.
Weird.
Yeah, so I had done that. You couldn't open your inventory, you couldn't save, you couldn't do anything. You could walk around and interact with things, so I was able to move forward in things, and I thought, oh, this is just a way, this is like a state of the game right now, so this is supposed to happen. And then it got to a point where I was in combat, scripted combat, and I was like, I can't do anything, I'm just gonna die here. And I died, and then I had to reload from before the New Game Plus, where you have to do this long drawn out bullshit, and I do it again, and now I have a different New Game Plus. Another quick spoiler, I guess, is that when you do New Game Plus in Starfield, it gives you a different universe. So certain things have changed. Sometimes. There's like Universe A that'll always be like the same. And then there's other ones that they sprinkle throughout that you get to experience that have some really interesting aspects. The first time I loaded in and it couldn't save was one of them. And then I had to do it again, and I got the boring one. And I was really annoyed, and that was part of the reason I stopped. It was like, what am I fucking doing here? I'm just doing the same shit, and I don't want to do the same shit. I want to do different stuff. I want more stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I beat that. But I'm hoping they figure out how to develop. Their acquisition, I think, when big companies get acquired by companies that have stockholders, everything's going to go downhill. Stockholders ruined gaming.
I wonder how long it'll be before they ever release the next Elder Scrolls game. Wasn't the announcement made back in 2018?
Way earlier than it was really worth bothering with. Like, I understand people were being really shitty. Like, one of the things I talk about why gamers are the worst people, because they don't get what they want. Death threats. They'll fucking swat anyone they can. They're scum. They're absolute scum. And these developers, not even the people who are in control, just the people who have to do the fucking labor, they're the ones getting the brunt of this shit because they're active on social media and stuff. And like, oh yeah, I'm a developer for this company. Like, well, yeah, well, where's my Elder Scrolls? I'm gonna kill you. Like, oh my god, calm the fuck down. It's a video game, dude. I get, we're all gonna die before Elder Scrolls 6 comes out. That's fine. That's why we have the mods for Skyrim. So, and why Scott,
We're all gonna die before it comes out anyway.
why Todd keeps releasing Skyrim again and again is because he knows we need it. Without it, there is no Elder Scrolls.
What do you think? Okay, so after Starfield, do you think the next big game for them will be Elder Scrolls? Or do you think they'll make another Fallout before then?
That's an interesting one because with the release of the Fallout show, it's obvious that people want to play Fallout more, and I'm pretty sure they've had a higher concurrent player base in both Fallout 4 and 76, and probably I think a little bit of higher sales. I myself have even started playing Fallout 2, which is a milestone for the world, to be honest. Because yeah, it just seems like we want to re-engage with that world and experience it, and I think that might change their idea of what they hadn't planned in the first place. I don't know their exact plans. I know some things have been reported. Some people leaks and things have gone here and there for over the past like 5 years, but I haven't really followed any of that. I would be more than happy if they decided to work on a real sequel Fallout to 4. The 76 is cool and all, but it doesn't feel real. And there's so many things about it that make it worse than any other Fallout or any other post Fallout 3 Fallout, because certain mechanics just don't exist. Fallout 4, you have companions, you have stories, you have things that you can change in the world. Fallout 76 is a multiplayer game. You can't do all that stuff. Not only are their servers some of the worst trash in the world, but like alright, wait. Before I rip too hard on their servers, they're doing something that other large server things don't do, and that's by making it like they have the guise of an MMO, and MMOs all play the fucking same. Fallout 76 is one of the few that actually try to make it so that your hit registers and all that stuff on this massive map are accurate and good. And you might think, oh, well, Battle Royales do that already, but Battle Royales don't have all this slew of other features and things. So I understand the complexities that they're doing, and I respect that they tried it, and it works as well as it does, but it's not good enough. And Fallout 76 doesn't have companions, real companions, and that's the thing that I hate the most.
That was one of the weird things to me that they didn't put that in, because it seems like a pretty easy thing to put in and make money for.
I thought the companions would be the most simple thing and straightforward. Because you have them at your base, and they just wander around. They just do that. They're nameless, worthless NPCs. Well, they're not nameless. You can get named ones. But they're more or less nameless, worthless NPCs.
Yeah. I'm curious to see when the next Elder Scrolls trailer or teaser will even be at this point.
Yeah. The way Starfield has released, I would have rather they just didn't do it at all and were working on the other things first, just because I care more about the character and personality that Fallout has and the interesting fantasy world that the Elder Scrolls has than this really, really bad aesthetic. Like, NASA Punk is probably the dumbest shit they probably could have thought of. How can
NASA Punk? Explain that.
That's what they call the aesthetic, is this believable sci-fi. And they got a lot of research into so many things. They wanted to make it as believable as possible. And that's cool and all, except it's the most boring and ugly. You look at original astronaut outfits, and what do you see? You see people wearing balloon suits, and they're walking around all stupid-like. What should we do? Let's design an entire game aesthetic around looking like that. Are you kidding me? Like, you're not gonna... Mass Effect made it sleek and sharp and cool, and it was fun. It was like, wow, I look badass. I also look hot as hell. This, I look like I'm wearing a balloon suit. I look like I'm wearing a T-Rex costume. You know, like, it's just your inflated when you're wearing a spacesuit, and there's only like one spacesuit, and that's the Mantis one, that has the dumbest looking hat or helmet.
Well, they're also ignoring the fact that the reason why spacesuits looked like that is because that's the first like attempt at that kind of thing.
Yeah,
They
and
didn't really know what they were doing.
and there are nicer looking ones, and especially since combat's so heavy in Starfield as opposed to real space, they have more armor plating, and it's a blend of spacesuits and military armor, and that makes a lot of sense. But I don't care about it making a lot of sense. It's an aesthetic. It's supposed to look a certain way, and it looks the right way of what they intended. But that's not fun and cool. When I build a spaceship, it looks like a purely utilitarian spaceship. There's no aesthetic to it. There's no nice aspects. I can paint it. That's cool.
NASA punk just sounds stupid.
Yeah, that's because it is. It's not a cool look. It's great for real life because you have to include certain things. This game ain't real life. Thank goodness, and it's not, because, man, everything would be worse. Yeah, I overall, I have a positive outlook on Starfield, but its general handling, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
This wasn't supposed to be a Starfield rant.
Well, I mean, we talk about games that just disappointed you. I mean, that's a pretty good example of
It's a big
something that
disappointment.
really disappointed you.
Yeah.
What did you're in the camp that nowadays Cyberpunk 2027 is a good game, but
I mean,
obviously,
I enjoyed it from the get-go. I thought it was fun the whole time.
okay. Because I was gonna say, because obviously it had a very infamous launch,
Yep.
and nowadays it's kind of received more well than it was when it first came out. What do you
Yeah.
think was the turning point for that? That it started being like, okay, this is actually a good game now.
Well, I would say their tumultuous launch was due largely because they overpromised and underdelivered, right? That's their biggest mistake. They still made a fun game. They still made a fun game that actually looked incredible. I'm playing on a pre-built that I got in like 2020, right? Not old, but not brand new. It's a pre-built though. So all these pieces are put together in a certain way. A lot of gamers have these custom built PCs because you can get a lot of bang for your buck when you build it yourself. Though with the pricing of, what do you call it, graphics cards these days, that's much harder to do. The custom builds are blending very many different. I'll explain why I'm talking about this. The many different types of internal architectures that they don't work together in the same way. So when a game launches and it's not, this is why PC ports are also so poorly optimized. They have so many different factors to make it work, and that doesn't always happen. They don't always work. Consoles they're like pre-built when it comes to computers, right? They have a very specific set of hardware, and then they'll release a second version that's the upgraded version, right? But it's all made to work together, and it blends in a nice way so that you can get the most out of it, which is why consoles, you can spend $500 on a console that can play games way fucking better than an $800 computer. Because that computer is built for so many different functions. Console's built for one, or I guess maybe four at this point. And so Cyberpunk was like, we're going to make something super cool. And they were like, we said we're going to release it for the last generation, and it runs horribly. Just fucking do it, I guess, man. Just push it out. Bad idea. Didn't work out. People were very mad, and they had some lawsuits going around them for it. But on my pre-built, game ran fine, looked fine, had some visual things that I thought were really stupid. Like, if I'm in the pause menu, the least graphics heavy part of the game, why is my character the most low resolution it's ever been? And I was able to. I think I modded and by modded, I replaced a single. What do you call it? Like a preference file. I don't remember fully. It was so long ago, but it essentially just modified certain settings in a certain way that someone found gave them a really good look and a really good performance by taking away certain aspects and improving other ones, and it cleaned up the UI for me. I think they, after their several performance patches since, they've done a great job making it so it just looks good all the time. And I've had the same experience actually with Fallout, or sorry, not Fallout, Jedi Survivor,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of people couldn't get the game to run right, but it ran perfectly fine for me. Same thing with Starfield, it ran fine for me. Like these games that people are complaining about running poorly, every single time they've run well for me. Dragon's Dogma 2 is another one, like, oh, it's the fucking performance is awful, unplayable. Like games used to run at fucking 20 frames a second normally. I'm getting 25 frames on this game when I'm in the densest area with so many NPCs. I'm not going to complain about that. It runs at all. I'm happy. I'm happy. So I think their performance issue is something that a lot of people don't understand why it happens. And so they just get mad that it's not perfect because it's really, really fucking hard to make that perfect. And Cyberpunk, I think if it didn't overpromise on its consoles, it would have been just fine. I think people have been still complained about the performance. They always do that. Review bombing is just something that whiny bitches losers that are called gamers do. And that kind of ruins things. But it also forces them to fix these problems. It just leaves a stain that some games don't actually deserve to have, and some games do. I'm not going to say that review bombing is perfectly unjustified, but it's whatever. I'm not going to discuss. I don't have the brain power right now for that. I have so many things I have to say right now.
This is what thinking about Starfield does to you.
It makes me short. My brain short like a circuit is what I was saying when I said that. Cyberpunk patch 2, I think, was their biggest effect. Phantom Liberty was flawless. I think it's been perfect. I love it.
Do you think that there could ever be a point where they could fix Starfield, or do you think it's kind of just like screwed?
Oh, they have plenty of opportunity. I think they will. I think as they release their DLC, because same thing with Fallout 4, they released, I think they had like 5 different DLC total if you account for the workshop inclusions. They might take a different approach using their creations thing with the paid mods idea. So they might go for doing that instead, but I think official DLC is more of a good idea just because the paid mods have there's something about them that feels wrong, right? When you get the DLC of a game, it's the DLC. This is an expansion. When you get the paid mods, it still feels like a mod, even though it's a premium content. Premium, I say that because it's paid for. Whereas I could just get a normal mod, know it, and I understand it's a mod, and it feels like a mod, and I'm not paying for it out of pocket, which I think is the problem. But the way they've, it's a weird thing. I don't know how they're gonna handle it. Since this acquisition of them being into Microsoft, I feel like they're going to push it a little harder, just because they kind of have to. For the DLC, though, I think that will solve a lot of the problems I have. It's not going to fix everything, and I'll have to look to the community for fixing the problems that I have. Especially when it comes to like the outpost building, since that's the thing I like to do the most. That's going to be the one that I look for the most. So I'm hoping they will expand upon that. I hope that with each DLC they include outpost building or construction parts. But considering outpost building is such a half-assed feature, I'm not counting on it. Just hoping for it.
I wonder if I'm surprised this really hasn't happened yet, but I wonder if Bethesda will ever do the remake train with their older stuff.
I think there has been talks of a potential Fallout 3 remake or New Vegas. No. It was Oblivion. What am I saying? I think
Oblivion would be interesting because I feel like there is groundwork for a great game. There's just so much that needs to be fixed gameplay wise.
yeah, I think excuse me. I think Oblivion has a lot of potential to being a because here's what I'm assuming they're gonna do if they do it right, and they should because they can. There's a mod for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas called Tale of Two Wastelands that essentially merges the two games in a way. You have to have both games because it's not a mod that adds one or the other. It just connects them so that you can play them both in one instance, and that's fucking awesome. That's huge. If they can handle it properly, doing Oblivion in the updated format that they've done for Skyrim, allowing I don't expect them to connect the two maps, but if they keep them in the same capabilities, then the community can fix that and do the same idea of connecting these countries because there's already a mod for Oblivion. I think it's called Sky Oblivion, and there's parts of it that you can already interact with in Skyrim. Like you go, I think, to the south, and there's a border cross, and you can just cross the border, and now you're in Cyrodiil. You can see the whole Oblivion map, and it looks more like the map from when you press the map button, but it's there. And there's mods that have rebuilt some of the northern cities and stuff that are immediately close to Skyrim, and that's a really cool idea. And I hope that they, if they do intend to make Oblivion and remake it, to allow that connection or some aspect of it, some bleed. I know their timelines are completely different, so like it would be or it'd be a big ask for them to include both countries. But having any kind of blend would always be welcome, in my opinion. I like if you're gonna make a bigger map. Oh, it's bigger is better. I like being able to visit the old map, like in Red Dead 2. Like I like being able to go to New Austin, even if it is an empty husk of what it could have been. Yeah, I think that'd be a cool way to handle it. I don't know. I played so little of Oblivion because it plays like ass. So I haven't been able to experience it in the fullest. But
I've heard from many people. Like I've talked to people directly that have said that the storyline in Oblivion is better than Skyrim. Now I don't know. I've played I played like pieces of Oblivion here and there, and I played through all of the Skyrim story. And I mean, I like the Skyrim story, but if that is true, it'd be interesting to see what a genuine remake of Oblivion could look like if they like modernize the controls and fix so much of the jank. And from what I've heard from numerous people that I know and online is that Oblivion has a much better story than Skyrim.
Interesting. I know some people had that opinion, but I'm gonna let Skyrim's longevity speak for itself.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I would. It's funny when I think because I remember the day. If you remember, Skyrim came out on November 11th, 2011. That was like the big meme, like 11, 11, 11.
Oh.
And it took me a while to finally get into playing Skyrim. It's a pretty enjoyable game. I think it's still pretty fun to play these days. It's one of those games. It's like, it sounds weird to say, but it's kind of like a more relaxing type game. If you just like, what makes Skyrim unique is that you could just go in one direction and find a side quest or a cave to explore that leads to a side quest.
Yeah.
I did find that very fun about Skyrim, that I could just pick a random direction and then go that way, and I would find a side quest. Or I find a new town with a bunch of side quests.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I don't think games. That's the problem with a lot of open world games these days, is that there is so much open space where nothing happens. Like I've thoroughly enjoyed Red Dead Redemption 2. Like it was a fantastic story. I loved all the story bits, but there were so many moments where I was just riding my horse doing nothing, and like I had to keep mashing A because if you don't consistently press A, but not too much, because if you press A too much, it'll buck you off. So you have to like rhythmically press A so the horse keeps galloping at max speed. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I mean, yeah, like it's a beautiful surrounding, but there's like nothing to do, and there was a lot of open space, and that's what made the end game, when spoilers, you play as John Marston from the first game. That's what made it really hard for me to finish the game because I just got so sick of horseback riding and doing nothing.
I'll admit that as much as I love playing Red Dead 2 and even Red Dead Online while it was bothered to being supported, um, the epilogue was something I just couldn't get through. I was just bored at that point. I was like, all the fun adventures is over. Now I'm just Marston, and I've got a family
Building up
that he
that's
doesn't
gonna
even.
die.
Yeah, right. Like I know what's gonna happen as the first game happens, but it's like the I think the biggest issue with now this might just be my own perception of it, is that it doesn't feel like John Marston's family likes each other very much. Like, and honestly,
Yeah.
that makes it less pleasant to do. Like when you're playing as Arthur, you feel like everyone likes you, even though they all don't. It's all glaringly obvious how they feel, right? And
Mhm.
maybe that's because the writing is really well done in one way or another. Yeah, like Micah sucks. Bill is funny in a weird way, and like you got all the other guys that like you got Lenny. Everyone loves Lenny. Lenny's a classic guy. And of course, Mary Beth is like she's such a pleasant person to be around. They're just you like these people. You're all fun to be around. You like them, and then you're playing the epilogue, and you're like, uh, Abigail's legitimately just fucking nagging me all the goddamn time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like the writing, like John Marston's character in the first game, is wildly different than in the second game. Like they're like two very different people, because in the first game, like he's obviously way more mature and composed, and but he also, it's kind of interesting because if you step back and analyze the first game, like it's very obvious that the Wild West is pretty much dead, and
Yeah,
he's like the last vestiges of that era of lawlessness, and that's why the Pinkertons have been like, you need to go kill your former gang members, because basically what they're doing is stamping out any remnant of that era.
yeah,
And so John is a very realistic guy. Like he like there's a poignant moment where he's in Mexico talking to another former outlaw, and they're just talking about how times have changed, and like how like they're not needed anymore, and it's like this like moment of realization where it's like, yeah, they really are like the last of an era. And then of course he dies at the end of the game, because that's them, the Pinkertons, finalizing, getting rid of that old gang. But John, throughout the entire first game, is a very serious, like, but respectful guy. Um, and in the second game, he's like a wildly different individual. He's like kind of an asshole, like reckless.
well, I think he's got a lot of consistent aspects about his personality, but I think he's supposed to be a little more immature in the first or in the second game because it's he's younger. Things are different for him. He hasn't gone through all this stuff yet, and I think he's a very sick of everyone's shit kind of guy, and that I think is consistent. He's just like, why are you such an asshole all the time? Like, shut
Yeah,
up. And he kind
yeah,
of keeps that personality of like, what are you talking about? Shut up. That stays around, but like his inexperience and as being like a father character or a husband, right? Like he doesn't know how to do that, which is why he's got that friction with Arthur in the second game, is that he fucking abandons his I don't know if they were even married at that point, but his baby mama and his child because he's not ready for it. He doesn't even know if it's his. He probably feels that and knows for a fact that it is his, but he just wants to deny it and all this other shit.
I will
And
say, I think
yeah, he grows from there forward.
I will say, I think and I just recently played Red Dead 1 a little bit ago. I will say, I think I like the first game story way more than the second one. However, I will say the second game further enhances the story of the first game. Because the first game, like, for those of you who don't know, which, I mean, it's a 14-year-old game at this point. What are you doing? For those of
Yeah,
you that
right.
don't know, the first game, like, basically you're hunting down the remnants of your old gang, the Vanderlyn gang. And it all ends with you killing, well, that actually he kills himself. He jumps off a cliff. But all ends with Dutch dying, and then the final part of the game is Pinkertons come and hunt you down and kill you, and that's pretty much the game. But like the first game, like you're hunting down all the former members, and they're constantly referencing events like the Blackwater heist that went wrong and how things fell apart, and you know, you're, because it's the first game, you don't know what it was like before all of this. And so then the second game comes out and it's a prequel, and it's kind of hard for prequels to hit when you already know what happens to characters. But it worked out really good because you finally get to see what the gang was like, you know, right after the disastrous Blackwater heist. Which honestly, like, I kind of wish the game started with the failed heist, but that's a different story for a different day.
Yeah.
But the second game starts off with everyone like in a panic, like we just lost several of our members just died. The whole plan's gone to shit, and there's already like cracks in the gang before the, like, right as the game starts. And the whole second game is basically like the first game is the Wild West has died. Like, we're done with that era.
Yeah.
The second game is the Wild West is dying. It's still there, but it's very clearly on the way out. And so you get to see, you know, what happened. How did the gang fall apart? What happened to Dutch that he turned from this charismatic, great leader that he was referencing in the first game into a psychopath? And so that second game really enhances the story of the first game. So when you go back and play the first game, there's a lot of references they make to the first game's plot in the second game. They're like, okay, now I see what they were going for in the second game here. And so that's what made it so much more. That's what made it enjoyable. I still think I like the first game story more because there is a lot of fluff. Like, I think going to Tahiti was so unnecessary. I still think it's unnecessary. Like, they spent this huge chunk of the game on this random island, and it's just like, ugh.
Guarma. They were in Guarma.
Sorry, I don't know. They wanted to go to Tahiti.
Yeah,
They ended up in Guarma. They could have cut out Guarma entirely, and I would have been perfectly fine with them just removing it.
Yeah, I think it's just because they didn't finish Guarma, I think, is the biggest thing. Like, Guarma could have had a much bigger impact, but it was so rushed and so short that, like you said, it just doesn't matter.
So, but I do think Red Dead kind of falls in that category. Red Dead 2 falls in that category of, it was an amazing experience. I don't know if I'm ever to play it again, just because of all those stretches of time that I was riding my horse doing nothing. It's
yeah.
Like,
how much of the gameplay is just travel?
But the plot was pretty great, and it really tied into 1 really well. A bunch of characters from 1 that you see in 2, but they're a lot younger. It actually took me a while to realize that you actually see the Pinkerton agents from the first game in the second game.
Yeah.
And so that was a nice little throwback. But again, I do wish, like, if I could change one big thing about Red Dead 2 is that they had started the game with the failed heist. Because the game starts with you in that snowy region, and like several members of your crew are already dead, and they're all freaking out, like, how did it go so wrong? And it's like, I kind of wish we got to see that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely intentional. I think one of the things they've done was they want you to not actually have seen Dutch or have any kind of cutaway of what happens, so that you can experience what's going on with the gang from like this shocking view. You're learning everything from one perspective, and a lot of the time you see things you shouldn't see when you're playing third-person games or narrative games. They'll show you something that happens. Oh, this happens off screen, or things like that the main character doesn't see, so you can form your own ideas. And I think they wanted to avoid that for a lot of it. And I think there's a lot of debate online, and a lot of debate on Dutch's downfall. Like, was he always like this? or was it after? Like, did it happen when he hit his head? Like, what?
I love that theory. I actually love that theory so much because when he got that concussion, he makes that comment like, "I'm not feeling so good, boys," and right after that moment is when he really starts going off the rail.
Yeah, I think I like the idea that he's always kind of been like this, and he's always been hiding it and just covering it up because he's in control. He's got the power that he wants, and he just wants to keep exerting that. But as things keep falling apart, it keeps slipping away from him, and he starts getting more and more desperate and starts acting more and more. I'm gonna say feral because he's like a cornered animal now, right?
He's losing his grasp on all the power he wants because I
Exactly.
think somebody brings that up in the game that he doesn't even want like to go to Tahiti. He just wants to keep his control over this group of people.
Oh yeah, I think that's what the Pinkertons are saying the whole time. It's like, Dutch is just a psycho who's just controlling you guys just to control you because he has
Yeah,
power. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a lot of that, and I think what was it? One of the nice parallels between like the O'Driscolls and the Dutch's gang is like Dutch is like, yeah, they kill people for sport. Or sorry, let me see if I can get my Dutch voice. Arthur. No, I can't. No, yeah, he's like, yeah, the O'Driscolls kill people for sport. And then I think in the first game when Dutch kills somebody or he's like holding somebody up, John's like, now why would you want to go and do something like that? And he's like, I don't know, sport, I guess. It's like
Yeah.
literally,
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
it's
I know
perfect
exactly what scene
parallels.
you're talking about too.
Yeah, I think it's the first time you see Dutch in Blackwater too, or something like that.
Yeah, and you have to escort that science because he wants to kill the scientist that you're with. I forgot the reason why.
Yeah, because for sport, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, good game. Second game is really good. Definitely, for those of you in the audience that play the first game too. Although I'm still surprised that it hasn't been released on the PC.
Wait, what are you talking
Which
about?
is
Oh, the first game. Yeah.
Red Dead 1 is not on the PC, which is crazy to me because
Yeah.
it feels like such a slam dunk.
Well, because
But with
if it
that,
gets ported, it's going to be a mobile port.
oh god. But with that sounds like a good part to stop for tonight.
Yep, we've hit our time. Well, thank you guys for listening to our our constant drivel. And what's the thing you do when you go off topic?
Segues.
No, that's how you go between topics.
Insanity.
Well, there's that too, I suppose. For all the digressions that we do, thank you so much for watching and listening. And yeah, let us know what you think about games that have disappointed you. Sorry, I'm getting worse as time goes on. Yeah, games that disappointed you. Tell us what you think about our selections. Another quick one, Skyrim VR was the worst VR port I've ever seen. But there's so many options for good game. Oh, look at that! It even did a cloud sync right then. Yeah. I'm. You know what? Fuck it. Thank you guys. Like,
Bye.
subscribe. See you later.